Hello there, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives of Change show. Today, I am going to start with a quote from Steve Jobs because I think that makes complete sense to start with this topic for today. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. And our topic for today, in conversation with the very amazing Bindi, is building elite performance teams that outperform. And I believe this quote encapsulates that topic really perfectly well. Welcome to Perspectives of Change. I'm your host, Sarika Kharbanda. My mantra is disrupt, unleash, and co-create, enabling the change DNA first within myself and hopefully then amongst everybody else I'm working with. At Perspectives of Change show, we are dedicated to nudge change forward by understanding and valuing multiple perspectives. And our topic for today, in conversation with the amazing Bindi Basan, joining us from Leeds in UK today. Is that true, Bindi?
Correct, yes.
So welcome with that. And I am super keen to bring out so many conversations, hopefully a lot of stories from Bindi's experience on this topic. But perhaps we just start with a short introduction of you, Bindi. I'm going to get you to do the formal one. I'll do the informal introduction because I think I've known Bindi since 2008, I think, where we met at Theatro, when it used to be called Theatro Enator in Pune in India. You'd probably traveled from UK for an assignment.
Yeah.
And then I think we lost connect, and then we met in Singapore. Again, I think in 2013 or so. Yeah, if I remember correctly. And then we've been connected ever since. So, but that's my amazing connect and introduction with Bindi. And I know her to be a visionary leader and an amazing transformation agent of change in what I've been seeing through her amazing journeys, even after Singapore. And yeah, I'm hoping to bring one such journey together here. But over to you, Bindi. Something about yourself that we can all learn from.
Okay, to start off with then, I deadlift. Yeah, I'm a power lifter. I think the people on the call right now, I know them all. But obviously I know there'll be people viewing this call afterwards. So my career has been in digital for a number of years across a number of different locations. I've been in predominantly leadership roles where I've been working with teams to deliver outcomes to businesses, to customers, usually in situations where we need to create from scratch or we need to change something to operate differently or think differently. I feel like I've always been in situations where organizations have wanted me to change or transform something or create something from scratch. I've spent a lot of my career working across Asia Pacific, met some incredible people working in that region. And I think that a lot of the experience and thoughts and ideas I will share today are based on most of my recent experiences in Asia Pacific, building and leading an exceptional team across the entire region to deliver outcomes. But I think the interesting aspect of that is that we were penetrating new territories. So I think it's easy to reference, let's create a project team to deliver some software. But I think with the complexities that I was dealing with in Asia Pacific, I think today's conversation will bring out a lot more depth and a lot more texture to the conversation around building teams, especially because of the complexity that I was dealing with.
Awesome. I think what comes to my mind with what you just shared about, the APAC team that you've built, and of course, today's story is going to revolve a lot around how you built this, how do we call it, the elite performance teams that outperformed in your experience there. I'm curious, maybe we should start with this question where, if we were to close our eyes and visualize that team through your eyes and through your vision, what would that visual look like? Help us there.
Yeah, so it was really interesting when I was creating the team in Asia Pacific. I think it's quite easy to sort of say, right, we'll have this structure, we'll hire this skill set, and we'll need this type of, competency. But for me, probably because I was quite inspired by the things that I did out of work, like dance predominantly, I wanted to create a team in the region that were like going to be the talk of the town. I had this vision of, I wanted people to walk in a room and know who my team was. I wanted to be in situations where I'm in conversations with people around the world and they'll be like, have you spoken to Bindi's team about this? What about Bindi's team? They'll know this. Or actually that idea came from Bindi's team. And that's what I really, really wanted to create, was this whole team that was going to outperform. And that was what I wanted from the start. Right. So that's what I was visualizing, I guess, and creating that feeling of alignment. I think in dance, when we bring people from all walks of life together to deliver an experience to an audience or a customer, it always just fascinated me how we did that, right? It's just like be on stage with 80 dancers that have come from all different walks of life, different experiences, different sizes, different thought processes, but the experience that we deliver to an audience was just phenomenal. And I wanted my team in the region to be like that, regardless of where I was hiring. I was hiring Australia, India, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan. I wanted the entire region to be this buzzing experience that people would get whenever they interacted with anybody from my team.
Beautiful. Oh, that sounds so good. Yeah, and I can visualize it. So I fully resonate with that amazing image that you just created in front of my eyes. So thank you for that. I can imagine that. But tell us, what's the trigger to this vision? Because there must have been some trigger, right? That, you're nudged into creating. Okay, so why create this kind of an allied performance team?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I reckon probably everybody on this call have been in situations where they've met somebody or maybe even themselves where people say, I'm not doing the job I was hired for. And I think one of the things that people fail on fundamentally at the start is understanding the why. Why are you hiring? What outcomes and goals and objectives are you trying to achieve? Because if you don't understand that, how do you know what you want to build, right? What is the vision? And for me, and it can evolve, right? It will evolve. All businesses do, but you need a starting point to actually get going and understand, well, what does that look like? What complexities do you have to think about? So when I was setting up in Asia, and sorry, I'm using Asia as an example because there was so much dynamic stuff happening. So I think it's really good to reference that. The region is highly complex. It's culturally diverse. It's probably one of the most diverse regions in the entire world, right? The company was penetrating that region. We wanted to have competitive advantage in new territories that we were going into. So it was going to be fast-paced. It was going to be ambiguous, probably uncertain. You didn't necessarily know the complexities that you'd have to deal with. But what was very clear was that what was happening in India was very different to Australia and how we would have to service Japan. I mean, obviously, there's some obvious stuff around languages, but it's just also understanding what does the business want to do in those territories and what do we need to service it. And I think that clarity is often lacking in organizations. I think whether you're building a team for a project, whether you're setting up a brand new, initial team on a startup, whatever that is, I think there has to be some level of clarity so that you can start to think about what does that team actually look like? What does it need to do? And therefore, what does it need to service, right? What are your objectives? What are your goals? What you're trying to achieve, right? In India, it was very partner-led. In Australia, we knew we would have to service some of the top large enterprise organizations as customers. It would be different dynamics. We didn't have a presence in Southeast Asia, so like Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, those areas we were going to have to penetrate and build that presence, customer presence, partner presence. So understanding the why and what you're trying to achieve as a business, or even a team. I mean, I think if I was hiring for HSBC, I wouldn't be hiring for the entire organization, right? I'd probably be building for a particular project or a product. But still, you need to understand what you're trying to achieve in order to know what you're going to actually hire.
Yeah, that's interesting. So tell me more. So where does this all start? Now that you've got a vision, you've got the why defined, and the number of parameters that you've got in your head, because each market's different, and the purpose of you hiring for the different markets is also different. And they're all going to work with you as your one team. But where does all this talent acquisition really start? Does it start with you, or where did it really start in your context?
Yeah, so I guess once I have the vision and view, and bearing in mind it evolved, right? Because the initial
Right.
penetration was selected countries and then it grows. So it's a continuous evolvement. But once I understood that, then I had a view of what I actually needed to bring in, right? So there's some obvious ones, practical stuff around skills, competencies, possibly a structure as well. There was a couple of regions which I already knew that it's going to grow. The team size is going to grow in those regions. There's no way I'm going to be able to service it just as one leader. So I'm going to have to put a leadership structure in place. Maybe not from day one, but when the team gets to a particular size, I'll be looking at leadership structure. So you've got all the practicalities of what you're looking for, skills, what technical skills, competencies do you need? What skills am I prepared to teach? Right? Because in that scenario, we were actually, the product was a new product on the market, right? So it wasn't necessary, especially when I was initially hiring, that those skills were readily available. So you would have to train, for those skills. So, but those are all practical, logical stuff. But the things that were really important for me was that when you're understanding, right, first of all, I know I'm penetrating a new market. It's going to be, the pressure's going to be high because we have to accelerate, right? It's not going to be like, yeah, we'll go into Singapore and see how it goes for 2 years and then chill, right? It's like literally you hit the ground running, right? And you're in a completely new territory. You're trying to sell a service product that is probably new to the market, right? It was so there's all these other factors that have been into place. So what else do I need in the characteristics of people that I'm hiring? So for me, and this was really evident from the start, right? I needed people who could operate in uncertain and ambiguous situations, people who would be able to go into a customer organization or a partner organization in a country that they might not have even visited before and have conversations, build relationships, deal with problems, sort out technical issues, manage expectations with senior leaders. I needed people to be able to do that. I needed people to be able to think outside the box, because actually a lot of things were new, right? We didn't know what was necessarily going to work. So I needed people to be able to assess a situation and think, you know what, maybe that stuff that we applied in the UK isn't going to work in this country. We have to shift our tactics to be able to see things differently. So, and I think that again comes back to, for me, critical, because it's not necessarily something that leaders would always think about. I need to build a team. Yeah, let's hire a few Java developers, a project manager, a BA, and a tester. But what about all the other skills and personalities and characteristics that you need in order for these people to actually be successful in the environment that you're just about to bring them into? So I was thinking about, well, what does it actually look like, aside from the fact that I wanted them to be like talk of the town. And I was super proud of what I was going to achieve and what I was going to build right from day one. Aside from that, the practicalities, but also thinking along the things that people are not actually thinking about in terms of, this characters, that what do I actually need to bring in? Because I knew what environment we were going in. But also the other thing to think about is what are my options, right? Because it's okay saying this is what my team looks like.
Right.
But if the market doesn't have those skills, and I didn't know necessarily in some of these markets, right? I'd never hired in Hong Kong before. I'd never hired in Japan before. So there was a lot of learning to do about how do those cultures operate? What is the process like? Where am I going to find this talent? So you also have to think about options, right? So, for example, if for any reason I wasn't able to hire a technical architect skill set in, let's say, Hong Kong, can I service it from the other regions? Would I be able to actually, you know what, I can get that skill set and that type of character really in Australia, then I can fly them over. So you have to think about options as well, because it might not necessarily be like, this is what I'm hiring, Mr. Recruiter or internal or external, whoever you're using, go find me these candidates. It's not always possible, right? So you have to think about what your other options, what alternatives do you have or can have if things don't go to plan in terms of what you visualized. So I think that was quite critical for me as well. And so I've understood the why, and then it's like, right, what am I actually doing? And so then I got a real good picture of what I actually wanted to hire. The other thing that I wanted to do, and some of the people on this call would have experienced it because they were part of that team as well, is I was adamant that I needed people to come in that did not think like me. I wanted breakthroughs. I didn't want people to say yes to everything that I was saying. I needed them to see things that I didn't see, because I was not going to get competitive advantage if I just brought everybody in thinking the same way as me. I needed that cognitive diversity. So that was really important for me when I was hiring as well, because if you think about outperforming, you don't outperform if you all think the same, right? You outperform when people can see and innovate and create and see things that other people can't see, have breakthroughs. So that was important for me when I talk about, well, what am I actually going to create to service these objectives that the business has?
Yeah, I love this point that you just brought out. And most of the leaders that, of course, I end up meeting or coaching, one of the insecurities that comes out is, oh my God, but you can't have somebody better than me, right? And that is so deep a statement, which stems out of the insecurity that they feel today. And I love what you're saying, and that's what we want leaders to be, because their success is your success, right? So it's so linked. But I want to come back to that question in just a bit, Bindi, where I just wanted to appreciate the fact that you brought that out. I love that, and I'm curious, what more from the mind of the interviewer, that is yourself. How did you end up, conducting those interviews to hire people before we get to the, let's say, the onboarding of the team and the environment that you probably set up for them? I'd love to hear, and for our audience to hear, maybe a little more on your mindset. How much time did you give for interviews? And, something about your interviewing process itself.
Yeah. So once I had a view of what I needed to hire for, then it all goes into talent acquisition, right? So then you're working with either internal or external recruiters to, however the company's servicing and trying to find candidates on the market, right? So that took quite a few iterations, actually, because this vision that I've just described to you, people don't get it on the first go, right? They didn't really understand what are you really looking for, and they couldn't quite pin it. It took a few iterations, and then once they got to know me, then it became a lot more clear and right, okay, now we see where she's going and what she wants to achieve. So that required quite a lot of effort on my part to sort of get people that are actually helping me with the talent acquisition to truly understand my vision and what I was trying to create. But for me, talent acquisition, of course, the process involves determining, do these people have technical competencies, so they have the business acumen, the typical skills and competencies that were required, do they have them? So part of the process is to determine that. I initially was involved in that process, but as I started hiring more and more people, then I could get the team members to assess that. For me, what was critical was usually the final stage of the interview. But in initial stages, obviously I was involved in all the stages, but right, when it comes to talent acquisition, once you've determined has this person got the competency that you actually want, or the skills that you want, what was absolutely critical for me, and it was a 2-hour interview. I think probably all of maybe some of the initial hires might not have done, but I think most of the rest of the people that I hired went through this process, a 2-hour interview. People said 2 hours interview. Yeah, with some of these people, within the first 5 minutes, I was like, I'm going to hire this person, right? Mm-hmm. The purpose of that 2 hours is not to determine whether this person is good enough for the team. And my mindset going into that interview was, can I make this person successful in my environment?
Nice.
That was what I was determining. That 2 hours was to determine and truly understand that individual, and then think, if they come into my environment, am I going to be able to make them successful? Right. And everybody's different, right? I've already described what the environment was as an example, dynamic, ambiguous, uncertain, dealing with different, changes, pressures, because we're trying to penetrate new markets. But everybody's different as an individual. And it was really important for me to understand, can I make them successful? in order to understand, can I make them successful? I need to understand them, right? Like truly understand them, like as a person and how they operate, what environment they are successful in. So you could argue, and maybe I might say it's not selfish, but for me, that 2 hour interview or even that talent acquisition process is for me to determine how I am going to perform once I've hired them, right? Because it's an insight for me to think. And there were so many people. I won't. Let me give you some examples. There was somebody that I hired. In the interview, I was thinking, this person is going to be such hard work, but I am obsessed with their intellectual capacity and capability. It's amazing. It's going to be hard work because it's going to be hard work for me because I have to work out how I'm going to keep this individual entertained and engaged because their mind is booming, right? Their intellectual capacity is off the charts. So that process for me was to determine how I need to make them successful and can I make them successful? Now, that did mean that there was lots of people that I interviewed who were exceptional talent that I had to turn down. And not because they were not good enough, it's just because they were not going to fit in the organization that I was bringing them into. I think we've probably got people on this call that are football fanatics, right? I mean, just because you hire a Ronaldo and stick him in your team doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be successful, right? You have to be. I was having a conversation this morning with my fitness coach, and we were saying that, maybe it's a bit easier when you're building a football team or whatever, but he's like, not really, because if you're bringing in, you might be bringing in, and sorry, excuse my, basic knowledge of football, but, if you're hiring a striker, for example, it's not, we hire a striker and we hire a defender and a midfielder and a goalkeeper, but who's feeding the striker, right? Who's feeding the balls? He's not going to be successful if the environment, the people and the other talent that you've hired around that individual isn't correct or isn't going to allow them to be successful. So I think those were really, really important aspects. And also just invest the time. These people turn up to your interviews giving away their time, and respect that time. And just, as leaders, regardless of that, they've taken time out of their day to come and speak to you for a potential opportunity in your organization. It's a two-way thing, right? You're selling to them as well. And just invest the time to speak to them. And I think if you're one of these leaders that sits there with a laptop trying to type notes when people are talking to you, please don't do that. Give them your full attention, right? In my interviews, 80% of my time was spent listening, right? Listening. So that means I'm doing the least amount of talking. And that's absolutely critical. And I could actually, obviously it's all personal information, but I could easily tell you what many of the people that I interviewed told me in their interviews, because I was listening. So I remember what they told me, right? So, and I think that's important. And the other thing that I would say with talent acquisition is that as much as you were so focused on bringing in the right people and making sure that you can make them successful, just also have an appreciation and respect for the people that you were turning down or you were saying no to, and just make an effort. And that was really important for me to make sure that I went back and actually said why I'm not hiring this individual, give them the feedback. And because I was actually I was interviewing people that were talented. I just couldn't hire them because I wouldn't make them successful in my environment. There were sometimes I'd come across people and I think, oh my God, you got so much potential. And you know what, you'd do so well if you did just, if you thought about that. Oh my God, have you thought about something different? So I would often go to the recruiter and say, I'm really sorry, I can't take on this person. But you know what? I think they'll be amazing in this. So my advice is maybe they should get a mentor or a coach, or maybe if they read this book or watch this podcast, it might help them move their career in the direction that they might not have thought about. So I think, I think as much as you're trying to serve the company that you were actually working for, I think just as from a humanity perspective, it's always nice to just give back, right? Even, at the end of the day, people have taken time out to come and talk to you. Just respect their time. And if you can make a difference or add something that might take their career forward in a different way, in a different company, then why not? But yeah, I mean, for me, talent acquisition, the mindset in summary for me was always, can I make this person successful in my environment? And oh my God, I want to hire this person. What do I need to start doing and have in place so that when they come in, I can make them successful? And also, one thing that I truly believe is that your relationship with your team starts from the first conversation that you have in recruitment, in that whole talent acquisition process, not after they've signed a contract and come into the company. The relationship's building and starts from the moment you've spoken to them. And for me, it's so rewarding when that works really well, because a number of people that I was hiring that were speaking to me before they'd even joined the company and were saying, can we read something? Can we get access to the product so we actually learn it before we join the company? You know, the excitement builds up on the other side as well. You want people to come in excited, and just people reaching out and saying, can I actually get started before they've even joined the company is a great sign as well. So yeah, I think that's probably for the talent acquisition. I love that process though. It's amazing talking to people. I just love it. It can be exhausting, which is probably why a lot of people treat it as a process, like, oh, let's tick it. What HR told me to ask this question, I'll tick it off, whatever. But please don't. Just treat people as people and speak to them. And just constantly, my view was, if these people are successful, my team that I'm going to hire is successful, then I'm automatically successful. The business is successful and the customers are successful.
Yeah. We want to viral that mindset. But here's the thing. Okay, so I'm mindful of the time, and I know we have a long way to go, Bindi, in my Q&A with you still. So I still want to unfold that remaining part of the story, but I do want to open up the floor for questions, and I just put that out in the chat. So I have a question already coming to me as a direct question here. Let me put that to you. And for everybody else listening and, watching us right now, feel free to, just raise your Zoom hand and, be ready if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question. But let me put the first question forward already. So that is, what are some of the indicators of metrics that can be used to measure the performance of teams?
Right. Okay. So I guess the one thing that we haven't moved on to is then how do you actually get them to perform, right?
Yeah. Maybe you want to give a bit of that context and then respond to this.
Yeah. So obviously, right. Okay. So the whole process. I've got the why. What am I doing? I'm out there hiring. Then the next thing is right. Okay. So how are you going to bring all these people together to be a team? And one of the things that were really, really clear for me is that people come together when there's a shared purpose and a shared frame of reference. And that was really important for me to define and put out there at the start, so everybody's aligned to the same vision and goal. Coming back to my dance thing, right? When you've got 80 dancers on stage, they're all in there for a shared purpose. They all know what they're trying to achieve. And that was really important, is actually getting that shared vision and shared purpose. When you're hiring talented individuals, once they've got a goal and you set the vision and they understand the shared purpose, they will create, right? They will generate. So in terms of, for me, measuring the performance, I was seeing it every day, right? But if you need to measure it in terms of typical corporate stuff, like, measure this, right? How many did you do? But it's outcomes, right? We said we had outcomes that we wanted to deliver at the start. I knew my why. To measure, is my team performing? Are we actually achieving those outcomes? We were getting competitive advantage in those territories, new territories. It was easy to measure that, right? Because I could see it. We were building relationships. We were partners. We were building the partnerships. A lot of the stuff that we were set out to achieve as objectives, we were measuring against those. In terms of performance, I guess I wasn't really, there were not hard performance indicators. For me, when you've got people that you bring in and they're doing a good job, it's little things that you notice, right? That you just know they're doing it. I don't know to put them on a grading or chart because I can see it, because we're getting outcomes. The customers are getting feedback from customers. They're getting people feedback from around the world. Oh my God, your team did this. The team are generating things. They're creating innovation that's having an impact on the product. They're doing stuff that's making a customer move forward. They're bringing in value for the business. So those were my measures. But for personal measures, I think probably Andrew on the call will definitely remember this, is very early on when I set up my team, one of the first things that I did was get them everybody together in Hong Kong because they hadn't met, right? Hiring across all the regions, bring them all together for a 1 week workshop where we discussed shared purpose. We discussed team values. A team defined their own values. I didn't define them. They come up with how do we want to operate as a team. They decided what they wanted: trust, ability to debate, the ability to disagree with each other. All these things were coming off, and we did a series of workshops that week to make sure we had that shared purpose and alignment. But I think for me, in that week, which was really, I think I just sat back and I thought, oh my God, this is working, and I was on the right trajectory, was they in the middle of the week had a call from customer service and said, we've got a critical issue coming and we need support from your team because you're in the time zone. I know you're away on this workshop, but can we get some help? And it was for, one of our enterprise customers in Australia. And I remember coming into the room and asking the team, look, I didn't direct, I just went, hi guys, we've got this issue and I need help, please, to look into it. And I had like 4 or 5 people get their laptops out and just started working on the problem together. I had somebody from India, Australia, Hong Kong. It was really interesting because it was all mixed. It wasn't just like, oh, the Australian people, the team are looking after it. It wasn't like that. People from around the region all just like grouped together and said, right, we'll deal with it. And then I came back and they was like, right, okay, Bindi, we've had a discussion. We've done the updates. We've updated customer service. If they need any more support, then let us know. But we've done what we needed to do. And not only that, then the other people that were still in the room, I probably had about, I don't know, at that time, maybe about 20 people in the room. So the other people were like, let's go get everybody's lunches. But none of this was directed, right? It just happened. And that's what I wanted to create, right? There's talent across this entire region. I've got a problem to solve. I don't want to say, right, okay, Andrew, you look at this problem. I just went, guys, I've got a problem. They worked it out themselves, right? They worked out who was going to look at it and they did it. So it's little things like that, right? That there's we had situations a number of times where it's very easy to just go in and deliver to the customer what you need to deliver. My team were not doing that. They were going thinking, how am I going to make this customer money? How are we going to innovate? What can I do? And then they were going off on weekends and researching and stuff like that. And I was just like, they were innovating and creating. So I think my measures for my team really came from the outcomes that we were driving, and it was visible.
Awesome. Love that. I love the example there. So yeah. I hope, because it came to me as a direct message, so I'm not going to take the name of the person, but yeah, I hope that does respond to your question. Just let us know. And let's move on to another question there, Bindi. That's from Claire. What is one of the best ways to deal with difficult conversations with teams or individuals?
I think honesty. I think honesty and clarity, right? Because I've been in situations where I've had to discuss organisation structure changes, etc., or whether that's an impact to somebody's role or whether that's just a structure change. And I think the appreciation that change is difficult for people, and it's important to understand. So it depends what you're dealing with, because a difficult situation could be that you're trying to deliver a difficult message. It could be because somebody's not performing. I have that in that team anyway. They were all performing. But if it's a situation where there's a sort of a conflict, or maybe you've had a complaint or something, then I think the key thing for me was always to understand the perspective from the person that I'm speaking to. Right, okay, I've received this information. This is the perspective that I've been told, but I want to hear your side of the story. So I always wanted to listen to people and understand their perspective, and then work out what my response or messaging was going to be. If I was delivering a difficult message to a team or an individual, then it was honest. It was always about honesty. It'd just be clarity, right? But understand, I think the thing is, people need to understand why anything is happening and the impact of that. It can't just be like, you did a bad job or you did a rubbish job or whatever. You need to work on your, I don't know, time management skills or whatever. But what does that mean, right? And just, I think it's really about understanding, right, okay, this situation occurred. There is an impact. This is a business impact or the customer impact or team impact. Depending on the severity of the situation, it's many cases. And we have this, right? Customer escalations, difficult conversations, team, God, my God, what did we do wrong there, right? That went wrong. That customer's come back and said they want to, they're going to go straight to the CEO if we don't sort this problem out. What is going on? Right, we understand the impact. This is the feedback we've had from the customers. How do we then move forward and solve it? So I think I think I've always just dealt with trying to understand, get the information, but then also when I'm presenting back any information is to make sure that I'm clear on the why and the impact. And I mean, those as a leader, you have to be prepared to react or respond, not react, sorry, react's the wrong word. You should never be reacting, you should be responding to how people may react in those situations, right? People can get upset, it can be an emotional reaction, could be an aggressive reaction. So you always need to understand how to manage that. I think, again, it comes back to if you really understand your teams and understand the individuals and you understand what makes them successful, then you should be able to manage those responses because you probably already understand their characters and how they possibly would respond. But you also get people that might respond in a particular way. So I think that's what I might have probably gone round and round in that one, but that's the way that I've dealt with difficult. They're not easy, but I think the key thing is to keep it factual and make sure you listen. Just listen to the other person because you might have got a complete misunderstanding of a situation. Just don't take it on face value that so-and-so said so-and-so did that. That's nonsense, right? Just sit down, let's understand. I've been in situations where somebody said, oh, that person reacted to me and it's not acceptable. It's quite easy for me to go and say, you reacted and that's not acceptable. So, right, okay, from your perspective, what do you see? And quite often the reaction, I've had this situation where the reaction was they emotionally reacted to the way that the person reacted to them. So it wasn't anything to do with the actual conversation. It was an emotional reaction between two individuals that caused a blow up or an aggression. So I think that, yeah, those are probably the ways that I think about it.
Awesome. Claire, does that help? Did that respond to your question?
Thank you.
Awesome. So Bindi, I think just in the interest of time, I do have still a number of questions and I do want to get to the question of outperforming, but just before that, perhaps you can guide us a bit more on your journey's challenges of setting up that environment while people were working with it. Because, it's not like a hunky-dory. Everything's not great on start, new people joining in, you're trying to help, but what kind of challenges did you see and how did you overcome those, or how did the team overcome those?
Okay, so sorry, I'm going to challenge this whole old school thinking of norming, forming, storming nonsense. Whenever it was created in the 1950s, when everything doesn't operate in that way now, right? I don't believe in that. I think that if you set up your teams for success from the start, then they can skip all that, right? I mean, when I brought the guys together in one location, okay, some of them had been with the company for a few months, some had just recently joined, but they were showing signs of a performing team with just a few days of spending time with each other, right? The other thing is I was quite clear on the principles and values that I was bringing in people for, right? So I wasn't creating conflict. I wanted people to respect the basic things about respect and trust were already evident at the start, right? So it was with people bringing it in. So I think in terms of challenges, for me, one of the biggest challenges was that I was jumping planes every week, right? So how do I give my own personal time to the team so that I could actually spend enough valuable time with them that actually sets them up for success? And also being able to spot things like sometimes, and this is quite, it's happened to me, right? Sometimes you can hire individuals who are brilliant, right? But then they come in and all of a sudden they just go like this. There's a worry they might be overwhelmed because people around them know stuff that they don't know, and suddenly you're back into that learning mode. Oh damn, I've got to learn the product, don't know anything about it, don't know how to deal with customers, and people can sometimes lose their confidence or go into a sort of a zone of worry because it's overwhelming. And I think as a leader, one of the challenges that I found wasn't a challenge, but it was the ability to spot that, and then the ability to step in and say, right, okay, let's just have a cup of tea or a drink, and I'd sit there and say, you do know why I hired you, right? and then they'd be like, yeah. And I was like, well, let's just go show me it then. That's what you're worried about. And then they might open up about maybe a worry, like everybody else seems to know more than me. Everybody else started that way as well. They didn't come into the company knowing the product. They had to learn it. I says, but when I was speaking to you in the interview process, you did this, and you've achieved this and this. Come and show me it. So it's also being able to spot that, right? So it's okay saying, I mean, I was quite proudly saying that I'm hiring people that are just going to hit the ground running, but you also being able to spot situations like that, right? And being able to, and then also dealing with the outside, right? As a leader, my job is to protect, to support, to empower the team. But it's quite possible that external factors might be impacting how the team performs. So it's great, they might perform amazing within the team, but if they're dealing with an external team or another team in the company that isn't playing the same ball, or is operating slightly different, you might have conflicts there to deal with. And you might just step in and say, hold on, you might have to support your team, or you might need to support the individual dealing with the situation and provide support in that scenario. But I think one of the key things for me is, though, I think that one of the ways that I got around the situation of these people are going to get on with each other and they're going to not perform and storm and whatever, is that the team, especially the initial foundational team, they set their own values as a team. How do we want to operate? What's important to us? Nice. So they owned it. It wasn't me. I didn't dictate it, right? So once they agreed to it themselves, they followed it, right? And what's really interesting is, right, when you've got people that are high performers already that you bring in, when you bring in high performers with high performers, they elevate the performance level of the team. So they're bouncing off each other. So one of the things that works really well is that I would say, I'd bring up somebody, let's say, I give an example, I'd bring up somebody in Australia and say, oh my God, that piece of work you did, or that thing that you did, the customer was amazing. And they'd be like, yeah, it was, but actually I get buzzed up by what so-and-so's doing in India, and have you seen what so-and-so's doing in Hong Kong? They were bouncing off each other's energy, so they were automatically elevating. And I think going on to outperforming, I think that's quite critical. When you set up people for success and create an environment where they can succeed, right? And bearing in mind, I hired creative problem solvers, right? So I knew they were going to be doing creations and innovations. They start to look for things which can give them that edge, right? How do we get that competitive edge? How do we go beyond what we're doing? How do we reinvent? How do we disrupt? How do we think differently? So then you start to get those people outperforming, where they're just, initially like, well, we've got some good performance here. We're achieving results. We're out there. We're penetrating the market. We had some really good customers. Yeah, tick, 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 good feedback. But the outperformance is when you actually get on a call and somebody's innovated. Bindi, I was talking to the customer and solved that problem, but they were telling me about this other problem that they've got. And then I went away and thought about it. And you know what? I've created this. And this now solves this. And actually it saves them this amount of money. So now they've created new revenue streams for the customer through some innovation. And that's where you got outperformance. And then suddenly I'm talking to the CEO about, oh, look what my team's been doing. Oh, damn, we need that in the product. And then you're innovating the product. So it it just grows and grows, and you have all these other impacts. But that doesn't happen unless you actually create an environment where those people can actually create and innovate, because that's when their energies just buzz out. And, you know, people say balance and say like, oh, people or your team are working long hours or whatever. It's also a recognition of what actually recharges people's batteries. And there were people in my team which I knew that, do you know what? They're going to go build a chatbot over the weekend, or they're going to go, like, he's going to spend, you know, the evening just working on something. And I could quite easily say, why are you still online? Go chill out, you know, balance. But that activity recharges their batteries, plays on who they are. Again, coming back to understanding what environment makes them successful, then just let them, give them the freedom to do it within parameters. Obviously, there were certain things that I wasn't able to do, and things had to go for approvals in many cases. But I think it's really just being able to create that type of environment, and then you start to see them outperform. And I think probably one last point to make, actually, before your next question, is the evidence was even more evident, if I can actually say that, is when we actually operate in unprecedented times. Because, and I quite proudly say, I think some of them are on the call, when COVID happened, the feedback that I was getting from the leadership team was, we don't understand why your team is not stressed out, and how are they being so creative? Like, I hired creative problem solvers, and they're dealing with the problem. They haven't started just doing something differently. Of course, everybody was dealing with some tough times during that period. 100% appreciate that. The rules were changing every day in every country, so I had to stay on top of those government rules. But the way that the team came together and supported each other, but not only that, they were able to innovate. They were able to see what problems were going to occur. I remember we had this session and I said, right, guys, it's 2021, March 2021. I've hired you all as management consultants, right? COVID, it's been a year in COVID. Tell me what could possibly go wrong and what should we be doing now? So you predict the future and tell me now. They came back with some amazing ideas. It was just like some things we could implement straight away, and they did. Some things we had to take to leadership and, you know, the executive board and say, do you want to consider this? But they were able to just take that scenario and situation and deal with and come up with ideas on how do we keep the business operational and running, and how do we continue to service our customers, understanding that the customers are going to be going through difficult periods, especially in some of the regions where they were working remotely. People were going back to their hometowns or villages, and internet connection problems and all that stuff. You know, they were aware of all those issues, but they were coming up with solutions and ideas on how we could still service customers and partners and make sure that the business was still able to run. So they're still innovating in times where it was very difficult. I had people in India, it was just remarkable. They'd be doing a whole day's of work dealing with some of the top enterprise clients. And then after work, they would be trying to get oxygen cylinders for their community, right? So it's not just about what they're doing at work. It's also about what they are as individuals. And I think all that plays a part in, you know, creating teams that just outperform.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question. So thank you. You already responded to that, because I was very curious what happened during the times of COVID, right? Because you hired this team pre-COVID, and yeah, but fantastic. Yeah, this has just been so awesome, Bindi. I'm sure we can continue for many hours seeing the passion that you have for your team and the teams you've built, and I'm sure they would have something super awesome to say back to you. But here's how I'd like to wrap up our talk today. With a very simple question. If you have any advice or any parting words that you'd like to share with us that any of our listeners and viewers can take back with them, what would that be?
It's probably my advice would be the statement that I said to the director when I was hired in that organization. I just said to him, I says, forget your processes, focus on your people. If you get your people right, everything else will fall into place. Just focus on getting your people right. That's going to be the top priority, always. And invest, right? It's not just, all right, I've hired them, tick box. It's not just about that. You, as leaders, are then accountable and responsible for making sure that that person's journey in your organization, for whatever, how long it is, and it doesn't have to be years and years, people's career moves on, is that you are doing everything possible to make sure that you're actually supporting and have their backs, support them, and create an environment where they can truly perform. That would be my scenario. Then everything else just falls into place, because that's probably the core, right? Core of everything that you're trying to achieve. So yeah, focus on your people and get your people right.
Beautiful, really beautiful, perfectly said. So thank you for those amazing words, Bindi. This has been an awesome, exceptional conversation I've had after a while. So it's just been a beautiful journey, and glad to be a part of that journey and seeing your team literally like those number of dancers on the stage and performing that beautiful act together. It's such a brilliant visual. So thank you for setting that in our eyes, definitely mine, because I can already visualize that now. And thank you for all the amazing questions that have come from our audience. Did you want to say something more, Bindi?
Yeah, just one thing, right? This is a great analogy, I think, right? And I've said this to a director before, is okay. There's a difference between hiring really talented people and them just reporting to the same boss, and hiring really talented people and creating a team, right? What you do, if you think about a rowing team, everybody's rowing in the same direction. What you often see is you see some amazing rowers in different boats going in different directions, and they're like, we've got some of the best talent in town, but they're all going in different directions. They're not a team. And I think that's one thing that is quite often missed. I feel like a lot of leaders try to build what they perceive as, I've got the best talent in town, but they're all operating as individuals that just happen to be reporting to the same boss, but they're not actually aligned, they don't have a shared purpose, and they're not operating as a team, and they're definitely in different rowing boats.
Yeah, that is so impactful. Very true. Mm-hmm. All right, people. So you heard Bindi here. So let's keep those conversations coming. And if any other questions, Bindi is still human, not yet a robot. So yes, you can please reach her offline too. This video and podcast will be online on my YouTube channel, Sarika Kharbanda, and also on perspectivesofchange.com. So yes, please do subscribe to those channels if you haven't already. But we will be putting up this already by Monday, the coming Monday. So stay tuned for that. Thank you again, everybody. And thanks a lot, Bindi. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.